not nearly as severe.
We have a totally unrelated question that's come through the comments on what our longest live stream ever has been. Well, if you were here during the Hurricane Florence coverage, that was our longest live stream ever, 7 days and 1 hour. But if you mean the longest time we spent talking, I think it was 20 hours or something like that during Winston. Something stupid like that, or 16 hours or something. Yeah, but Matthew, we had downtime as well. But there we go. We're certainly, we're trying to stretch round to 24-hour commentary in these types of situations, and that's why we are here with the latest at 2 in the morning Central Time, because there are always people around who need to know the latest information, and of course the information is always changing.
Well, Nathan, I think there's an update to the tornado, Adams County, North Dakota.
Not as far as I can see.
No?
But, if we weren't
North
here...
Dakota.
Oh.
If I
there are no warnings in North Dakota, right?
But if we weren't here to cover the commentary on the stream in the last hour, we would have missed that tornado warning, which is affecting quite a large amount of people, more people than are contained in my town. So that is certainly a significant situation that we ought to be covering, and we are. In the meantime, David, are you seeing anything on the wires?
It is quiet, Nathan. Very quiet.
And he sounds surprised. Well, everyone is hunkering
down.
No,
not really.
Why don't we talk about all those green areas there, Thomas? I'm assuming they're flood-related warnings.
Yeah, so if you're within this green area, you're in a flash flood watch. It doesn't quite do this justice, and the reason why is because the storm here is really generally expected to cause flooding for most of these tropical storm warned areas as well. If you actually look at my cursor as I go over a lot of them, you'll see flash flood watch. So if I turn off the tropical related alerts here for just a moment, which I can attempt to do, I'll just turn off the hurricane warning because I think that'll be sufficient for current needs. But if I turn off the hurricane warning and the tropical storm warning real quick, the inland tropical storm warning, you'll see this does extend quite a bit further than where you can see it, and that's because there's a high risk of excessive rain according to the Weather Prediction Center. And again, there could be quite a bit of rainfall. If we actually take a look at the quantitative precipitation forecast, you can see just how much is expected with a very good bit of expected really near Baton Rouge really is where I think some of the highest rainfall could occur. The Weather Prediction Center, I agree. Nathan was touching on this earlier, but I'd also have to say I think New Orleans and other parts of eastern Louisiana could get more rain than what's currently. This is basically a general confidence level of how much rain is supposed to fall. So to see slight inaccuracies isn't too huge of a deal as long as it gets the general message across. There's going to be a lot of rainfall.
I'm just looking at the characteristics of this rain, when the most rain is likely to fall. And according to the GFS model, it depicts the highest rain rates occurring actually this afternoon local time. So we've still got a long way to go here. And to be honest with you, GFS model only has the landfall occurring at about lunchtime.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and I know I was mentioning it earlier that could be the case. And honestly, I think it is gradually looking more and more like with this storm.
Yeah.
With time. Looking at the latest imagery, you can see the convection over to the east of what now looks to be the well-established center has kind of faded away compared to what it once was, but we are seeing a nice convective flare-up around the center of circulation that could mean that we are going to start seeing more of a and really just a more organized tropical cyclone in general.
I'm just looking through all the models. None of the models have a landfall earlier than 9 a.m. Central Time.
Well, at this point, I would not think so, especially with how slow it's moving.
So,
Could I?
basically, if you're staying up to try and catch the landfall, it's not going to be overnight tonight.
We have a question in the chat. What if this is just a storm with high winds? That would actually be good, in my opinion, if we're just getting high winds and they are constrained by what we believe the storm to be, a high-end tropical storm, a low-end category 1 storm. There will be power outages for sure. There will be damages to small structures. But if it's just winds, we've avoided a lot of the issues of storm surge in the Mississippi River area. Of course, the Atchafalaya Bay, the Vermilion Bay, that's going to have quite an impact. But if it's just winds, we're in a good place, but I'm worried that we're not going to be there. Looking at the radar as it's presented, that convective flare-up on the east side, it does change, it ebbs and flows, but it is getting more massive in terms of the entire space it covers. And that leads me to believe that we are still going to have these rains. They may not be in the areas that were predicted even this morning. They may not be in the amounts that were predicted this morning. That's all subject to change at this moment. But if it were just winds, we'd be lucky. But you can't separate one from the other at this point.
Looking on that satellite imagery, you can definitely see how that could happen. The storm continues to move in its northwesterly direction. Huge amounts of convection on the eastern side will remain the case, and that's where all the rain will come from. But we're not going to see anything like we saw 2 days ago with random thunderstorm complexes blowing right up over New Orleans. It's all going to be associated with the central part of the storm now, I should imagine. And the further west it goes, it's a fine line between getting a lot of rain and a little rain for places like New Orleans. And that is how we've gone from, or at least the National Weather Service has gone from 20 inches to 6. We're still thinking 12 though. Oh, there we are. If you've got any comments or questions for us during our stream this morning, send a message. Start your message with Force 13 all in text. And we'll get back to you. It's pretty quiet out there, so we'll be able to take on anything you've got for us as we continue to watch Barry. There comes a point where we start to run out of things to say because not much is actually changing. So do pardon us if we get a little bit slow, but we are watching the whole time, and we'll keep on top of any tornado situations that progress throughout the night too.
Do we think that Barry is getting more organized from the chat?
It's at least staying the same,
Yes.
if not increasing in organization.
I personally think it's increasing. The convection is not as big as it once was on its eastern side, but we're seeing a much better defined point now, and something Something else to find is that this is now, I think, at least pretty obviously the dominant center. And something that I did find to be an interesting feature is that it does look like it may be taking a slight jog to the northeast, like we did see on Nelson's radar a little bit. But
Oh wow.
back to the question of if we are seeing more organization, I'd say definitely the storm looks much more symmetric, and I think it's really going to start to blow up near the center as deepening will. And the 75-mile-per-hour hurricane again, like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if a hurricane's knocking on our doorstep within the next 6 hours.
Going off the radar, as you mentioned, Thomas, Gulfport and Biloxi are about to be hit by a line of storms. It's going to be a fairly fast-moving line. It does not look too severe. Pascagoula in probably about 15 minutes from this time will be hit all the way over to Dauphin Island in Alabama. There are some storms that will reach there, I would say, in probably about 30 minutes. It's not as tight as some hurricanes as we've seen where you could just see each discrete line. These lines are very spread out and they're a little bit unpredictable at the moment, but they are getting stronger and stronger as presented on radar as we've looked over from even 8 o'clock last night to 10 o'clock to when the US stream went live. They certainly are looking more intense on radar.
I mean, that's true, and like you said, this is only going to grow more intense with time. The more time the more the storm moves in, the more intense the lines are going to get. And like you said, we do have a relative unsevere, but still a heavy rainmaker of a line of storms that's going to be moving towards New Orleans in the near future. So it's still going to be an interesting evening with the storm as things do continue to move and the storm does continue to move closer and closer to land. The fact that the storm is continuing to slow down is quite interesting, and the 30-mile-per-hour current storm speed
Which
also
is
does
really
indicate.
slow.
So, yeah. Something else to note is on this best track, you can see this general westward movement. You can see the northward curve it's expected to take. In these past at least 3 forecast tracks, the track's been this every time, and it's just not doing it.
That's a
It
good
looks like
point.
it looks like it finally might be starting to, but it's just not making the turn to the north right now. And it's just I feel like this is going to gradually shift farther and farther and farther westward until ultimately a landfall occurs. Until then,
Oh no, don't say that.
That
we're
would
going to
take it
be.
towards the
Oh, I
eastern
knew
and
you'd say that. Just waiting for it, David here.
no, I'm
That'll
just
take it to
thinking about the
Texas.
eastern side of Texas.
This
Well,
won't
Thomas,
go into Texas.
Thomas,
Nelson?
if I could challenge you on that a little bit, we've talked about how the radar presentation looks like a jog to the northeast. I'm looking at the track right now as you provide it on your site. Do we think that the center can reorganize so far west at this point? I would be thinking that obviously a stall in its forward motion will let it drift west, but all the way over there, do you really think so?
No, I don't. Honestly, I'm just saying that it's. My point is that it's not taking the turn west
Yeah.
when not the turn west. The turn
But
when we're still
in our last video update that you aired earlier on, many hours ago now. The latest was that it was headed for, and we were projecting, or I was on the CDPS scale, projected landfall on Marsh Island. It's still on course for that.
And it still is. And if the northward shift does occur, then we're going to see what is pretty much being expected. The problem is we're just not seeing the shift. It's heading at a steeper slope. The current forecast still forecasts a landfall in the same general location. It's just a farther and more northward turn. And the thing that I'm just seeing here is that I think this just might go further west than expected, despite the consistency in the forecast at this point and how close we are to landfall. Again, I don't think it's going to make it into Texas, and even if it did, center would be ripped apart. I mean, steering would just not allow it to do that with getting itself ripped apart. I don't think it's going to do that. But I think that a shift northward may just take longer than expected.
Now, Thomas, might be asking a little bit much of you, but we were talking about some ridging and troughing in Arkansas, northern Mississippi, up into Tennessee earlier tonight. What do you see in those steering patterns? Should it take that shift to the north? And given the current presentation on infrared satellite, when we started this broadcast, I was fairly certain that the New Orleans proper area might be a little more in the clear of some of the rainfall, but it's looking like it's building in on the east side. And of course, we know that's usually a bit of the stronger side. And I'm worried about when that northward turn would come. Do you see anything in the upper levels or mid levels much further north of Louisiana to affect the guidance?
So if we take a look at overall upper level influence, it would be way farther north. I'm not sure if we have 6 Zulu rapid refresh mesoanalysis maps here. We do, so we can see the latest mesoanalysis. But if we take a look at it at the 700 millibar level, we're still seeing this ridge kind of building in. It's really starting to poke its nose out into Missouri, but we're seeing the front really getting close, and we can see the frontal boundary clearly because of where the dry air and wet air does, I guess, collide, if you will. But with the front, it's kind of stalled out, and it looks like it's kind of stalled out, but it looks like a general mode of the front itself is actually away because Barry is managing to push that. But with that pushing, I think that is also a northward influence. If we take a look at wind barbs, generally a northward influence at the lower levels, which is where Barry is most influenced, and that northeastward jog that we're seeing is supported by the lower chart. Where things get a little more complicated is when we get into the higher levels, when we get into the 500 millibar, where we really do see this ridge that's building and is creating and is just getting stronger and stronger. We're seeing this very strong block at the upper levels. And so the thing about that is it's going to continue to push. It's going to try and push it westward, and as Barry strengthens, it's going to be harder for it to turn northward. The thing is, the front's just gradually getting more and more influence. And so what could be occurring is if it's already moving northeast, it could already be taking the turn. The turn could already be occurring slowly but surely. But if it's just a jog, I really couldn't tell you exactly when that turn to the north would occur. It depends on how fast the front moves, really. And if we take a look at model guidance is generally showing the northward shift really have already happening. So it's really difficult to tell. But I'd say it could be starting to happen with that northeasterly jog. I think that could be the nudge the storm needs in order to start that shift. So I hope that was a sufficient answer.
Well, following on from that, as you outlined the high pressure, do you think that that could cause enough suppression that a lot of the precipitation as the storm moves inland still lags a bit to the southeast, which causes more problems for the extreme southeast part of Louisiana?
I mean, it definitely might. As this moves in, shear's going to increase. So it could. It most certainly could. And I think that the GFS is in support of that solution. I'm not sure about other model guidance, but I think that solution is probable at this point. And I think that can explain multiple things. First of all, the GFS showing that solution rather clearly, where convection lags off to the south and to the east there. By the time it makes landfall, I believe the HMON is in general agreement with the lagging, and you can see it beginning to lag behind as well. And I think the H-Wharf is also in support of that solution, and the H-Wharf is not as strongly in support of all the convection lagging, but generally heavier convection after the storm makes landfall. So I'd say I'm looking at both current patterns and model guidance that yes, a lag off from where the center is for the convection to have to lag to the south of the storm. I think that's more likely than not, just given model guidance and current steering.
All right, let's take it back to the latest satellite imagery that we're looking at on the screen now. You can see what appears to be another little blow up there occurring further west, which must surely be closer to the center.
Yeah, the flare up is very close to the center, if not on the center, I believe. I think you can actually see a little bit of a spin on it, if I'm not mistaken.
Maybe.
I think the 1 minute imagery showed a little better.
Yeah, we're not showing
that
now the minute for better context. But whilst you get that up for us, if you are, Nelson's showing the radar still. What can we determine from that, if anything?
We can. This is a very broad system. Obviously, I don't know what we can determine. Baton Rouge, Walker, Livingston, they're about to be in for a line of storms and a persistent line of storms. We do have viewers here in Hammond. That they're it might just curve around Hammond. A meet looks to be in for it. But what's really interesting are the storms that are off the coast of Louisiana, off the Chandelier Islands, which is that crescent-shaped set of islands above the toe poking out, which is Plaquemines Parish. You do see the storm tracks moving directly north past Pascagoula, Mississippi. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on that a little bit. Martin's Bluff, Helena. It's such an unpredictable storm, given its shape, given its size, given everything that's gone wrong for it. Based on what we knew hours ago, it would have been inland and we would have all been asleep. But Gulf Park Estates is in for a long period of rain. Gautier, Van Cleve, Mississippi, they are in for a bit of a long period of rain. Moss Point and Creole, Escatawpa. It's amazing how disparate the effects of this storm are, even going over into Daphne, Fairhope, Loxley, Alabama. This is on the east side of Mobile Bay, those storms over there.
And
that's
when I was looking at the models that really, there's no model that predicts a landfall before 9 a.m. now. So that could be a huge amount of time for severe rainfall totals to start to develop in central and eastern parts of Louisiana.
Agreed. And just in terms, just to put some things to scale, Nathan, I'm sure you're very well aware of them. But the radar for New Orleans is located in Slidell. It's over here at the I-10, I-12, I-59 meeting point on the North Shore. Biloxi, Mississippi is an hour's drive away, about 70 miles.
Wow.
From the Louisiana state line to the Louisiana, Mississippi to the Alabama, Mississippi state line is 75 miles, just to the northwest of Bayou La Batre. It's 34 miles to Mobile Bay from there, another 30 miles to the Alabama-Florida state line. We're talking a space of 200 miles where we're seeing storms, possibly severe, flaring up from the center of circulation as we know it. And as we're doing that, New Orleans is in a dry slot.
It really is at the minute, yeah. The northern side still pretty barren. We're taking a short break here at Force 13 HQ. We'll be back in just a moment with more on this live coverage. Tropical Storm Barry. Good question there that just came in regarding the 3 other hurricanes that struck Louisiana. We just saw it flash up at the end of that half hour there. Yes, I was intrigued to find that information myself as well. The other ones were Hurricane Danny, Hurricane Bob in 1979, and Hurricane Cindy in 2005. We're back. This is Force 13 Live, looking at Tropical Storm Barry during the overnight hours here. It's 2:30 Central Time, and we'll continue to watch it on radar and satellite. Who'd like to speak next?
Well, looks like... Oh, go ahead, Thomas.
Oh, no, Isaac, it's your turn. Go.
Hey! Passing on the torch to me. I was looking at the Lake Charles radar, and if I'm not mistaken, it looks like the center is making its way onto the radar over there. You can barely see it, but it's somewhat there. Really devoid of any rain, really. Just light rain, if any. But I'm starting to form on there. Man, this storm's just been quite a difficult one, really. We thought it was going to make landfall a lot sooner, and now it just decides to pull on the brakes and to slow down now. What a storm. And since of that, it has more time over water, which means it has a still has a chance of becoming a Cat 1 hurricane, like we've been saying for the past 2-3 days or so, something like that.
Yeah.
So it's just this is just like a difficult to forecast storm. I can't remember last time I remember a difficult to forecast storm in the Gulf of Mexico. Probably off the top of my head, probably Debbie of 2012. That one was quite difficult to forecast. So yeah,
Debbie.
yeah, in 2012, I remember that it was originally forecast to head over towards Texas, and then it went over towards Florida,
Oh
and now
yes.
it was pretty difficult to forecast for like a day or two.
Wasn't it also
So,
Karen of 2013 that fooled some people?
oh yeah, it was supposed to make landfall as a Cat 1, and then Shear went over and killed it.
To put it one way. Okay. Well, Shear's certainly not going to kill Barry as we continue to watch that radar imagery and on satellite. There it is on satellite. A blow up there in the left on the left hand side, possibly over the center of the storm or very near to it.
And just for information's purposes, that radar that was just on the screen was out of Lake Charles. I had switched from the New Orleans radar to the Lake Charles radar, which is why you did not see those storms at the Mississippi and
Yes.
Alabama coast.
So you look at that rotation, and it sort of implies that the center is, I would say, north of where that where that convective burst, north and east of where the convection burst was, and just dead reckoning that right now, Nelson, would put the center still around 30 miles offshore.
I would agree with that.
But it would also put it about 22 miles north of that convective burst, which is interesting.
But it doesn't, in a lot of situations, we can see the convective burst and the radar line up and really give us a good reckoning of the actual center. But as we've debated in the previous hours, we're unsure which circulation at the lower levels is the actual center of this storm.
What we are seeing here, though, is just how dry the leading edge of the storm is. There's hardly anything there.
But yeah, pretty much like a skeleton. It's hardly there.
But don't be fooled, it will still be producing tropical storm force winds and maybe hurricane force gusts.
Yeah.
And as we've heard from some people who are finding out already as far north as Hammond, 30-mile-an-hour winds, I think they were saying. So, you go for it. What's your wind speed now, Nelson? Are you in a... Would you say you're in a sheltered area or exposed or neither?
I'm in a very sheltered area. I'm in a neighborhood. I am only about half a mile from the Mississippi River, but it is a well-built uptown, as we would say in New Orleans, neighborhood. I'm getting wind speeds right now of 10 gusting to 17. I very recently had a gust of nearly 27 miles per hour. But these weather stations, it's not an official weather station. It's a very good weather station, but I mount it on my house where I can mount it. And unfortunately, that's not at the very highest point. It's not above all the other buildings in the area. So it is a bit depressed from what is going on. I'm trying to look through some news channels because I have the luxury of being in the local area and switching around to see what multiple agencies are putting up at any given time. But again, I would say that my sustained wind speeds are nearly 20 miles per hour depressed from what you would find in an open area.
And bearing in mind that a lot of New Orleans is under sea level, which might also have an impact on the winds.
Yes, but I think the true bigger issue is being in a residential area. I've got 200 windbreaks between me and the open area of the Mississippi River, which is a mile wide. And there's simply nothing I can do about that. I want to get the most scientific observations I can, but I'm constrained by realism. I cannot put a 200-foot tower up to get out of the way of things. And if I did, I would get inaccurate surface readings as well.
Yeah.
So it's
All right.
just trial and error.
Well, we're in between National Hurricane Center advisories right now. We've passed the midpoint between the latest update and the forthcoming update, which should arrive in just over an hour. The latest information from the National Hurricane Center, though, I'll read out the whole thing right now just so that people can get a sense. So they said at the 1 a.m. Central Time advisory that Barry is inching towards the Louisiana coast and expected to be a hurricane when it makes landfall later today. Dangerous storm surge, heavy rains and wind conditions expected across the north central Gulf Coast. 65 miles per hour, 993 millibars, moving at 3 miles per hour, slow. Hurricane warning for Intracoastal City to Grand Isle, a tropical storm warning for the mouth of the Pearl River to Grand Isle, and Lake Pontchartrain and Lake Maurepas, including metropolitan New Orleans and Intracoastal City to Cameron, a storm surge warning for Intracoastal City to Biloxi and Lake Pontchartrain, a storm surge watch for Biloxi to the Mississippi-Alabama border, a hurricane watch for the mouth of the Mississippi River to Grand Isle and Intracoastal City to Cameron, a tropical storm watch for the east of the mouth of the Pearl River to the Mississippi-Alabama border. I trust that everyone knows what those warnings mean. At this point, anyone under warnings should be expecting those conditions imminently if they aren't already occurring. Tropical storm force winds extend outwards up to 175 miles from the center, according to the National Hurricane Center. As of 1 a.m., a weather flow station at Terrebonne Parish, Louisiana, recently reported a sustained wind of 41 miles an hour, with a minimum pressure near the center, 993. Expected storm surge 3 to 6 feet at Intracoastal City to Shell Beach. Shell Beach to Biloxi, 3 to 5 feet. Lake Pontchartrain, 3 to 5 feet. Biloxi to the Mississippi-Alabama border, 2 to 4 feet. And Lake Maurepas, 1 to 3 feet. A storm surge of 2.7 feet was recently reported at a National Ocean Service tide gauge at New Canal Station. No other specifics really, just that rainfall totals could reach isolated maximums of 25 inches. We're expecting a further 12 inches in New Orleans from here on in. That's not counting what we've already seen. The next update from the National Hurricane Center is a full advisory at 4 a.m. Central Time, which, as I say, is just over an hour from now. Let's go back to Thomas's screen with some more graphics.
So this is an interesting graphic that I've decided to overlay over everything else, and it's the mean sea level pressure in isobars. And what you'll notice is that it looks like the National Hurricane Center center fix is pretty much right, according to this, with the deepest pressure actually decoupled from the actual convection by about that 20, 25, maybe even 30 miles. And if we take a look at infrared satellite imagery, I mean, that's actually quite evident. We can kind of see it if we look closely here. And we notice the lots of convection kind of firing from this point. So the question is, if the deepest pressure is here and the convection is firing from here, despite the fact that pressure is not supposed to be at its deepest point, there are two questions that I have with the way that these observations are derived, because obviously we don't have all the observations in the world over the water. Could we think that possibly the reason why the deepest pressure is here is because the center fix of tropical cyclone is here, and therefore for surface observations due to that, they are going to say the deepest pressure is there, or do we think this is where it actually is?
Interesting.
I'm
not sure.
that western, and I'm going to try and bring up a screen share here, leaving the radar, which I do want to get back to in a moment. But let me bring something up. Bringing it up, we show convergence and divergence here, and if you look at it, and I'm gonna the convergence where the deepest pressure would be, again, it looks to be to the southwest of the current storm's position. Divergence, when added on, goes pretty much due east at a greater level. I would have to think that these are, again, decoupled vortices at different levels. So I don't know how to resolve them. I don't think that we're getting an exact fix. I think, much like we've seen before, we could see a north or even east jog of what we believe to be the center of circulation. I do think it will come up through Vermilion Bay and as issued by the National Hurricane Center, but I just don't think that we've got a defined center of circulation yet.
And
It's
it
funny
would
that
be
we say
kind of
that. It's almost a hurricane.
Oh dear God.
yeah. I know the fact this is nearly a hurricane and we can't say there's a well-defined center is kind of strange to say, isn't it?
But look at that latest 1 minute satellite imagery that you're now showing, Thomas. The flare-up is continuing, that particular one on the left-hand side, and it looks like a big one is blowing up right now out of that.
Yeah, and again, it's really kind of convincing me that's where the deepest pressure must be, at least in the mid-levels where the convection can be produced. I think that if we had visible imagery, that would be very helpful in this case in telling us where the center is.
I was convinced that this storm was going to make landfall overnight because it's a popular conception that all storms tend to do so.
Exactly when we're the most tired.
But it would now appear, if you've just joined us, that landfall will not occur earlier than 9 a.m. Central Time, and could be even as late as the afternoon.
Thomas, Nathan, I'd like to enlist you on a point. I don't know, David and Isaac, are you still with us?
I'm still here.
I am still here.
All right, gentlemen. Nathan, if you could bring back up the radar that I'm sharing. I've gone to the base velocity.
Yep.
And what I'd like to note is that where we are in the base velocity, again, this area where my mouse is the Virginia and Atchafalaya Bay areas, all the way through here. But if you look at the red area, and specifically where I am, this is 7:38 Zulu, so 2:38, about 10 minutes ago now. We are looking at nearly 8,000 feet above sea level based on the radar beam, but we've got 68 to 69, 70.5 miles an hour. I'm going to advance a few frames, and you can see it's still the same relative coupling, the same relative storm path. We're looking at 69.3, 70.5 miles per hour. And I'm going to go to the last one, which does degenerate a bit, but about 70.5 miles per hour at about 7,000 feet. Do we think that in the hour, probably an hour and 5 minutes from now, the NHC is going to call this a hurricane? based on that? Because it does seem sustained. It is high, I will admit that. Or are we
I
going to
don't
get
know,
a
Nelson.
70 mile per hour?
What I can tell you is the ATCF haven't budged at the 6 Zulu update, which is just over an hour ago. And they do follow that quite closely. They might go in the middle at 70 miles an hour, but stranger things have happened, and they could call it a hurricane at any time, really. They do tend to do things when we least expect them to.
Sorry, I would like to mention strong thunderstorms will affect the following counties: southwestern Mobile until 3:30 a.m. Central. At 2:30, or I'm sorry, good God, I'm tired. 2:43 a.m. Central Daylight Time. The strong thunderstorms was located 8 miles southwest of Dauphin Island, moving north at 45. Wind gusts 45 to
Get him
55
sidetracked.
will be
It's
possible.
important.
I just made 8 errors in one sentence. Give me a break. Going back to the radar, Dauphin Island, Alabama, this line of storms, and if we put it into motion over the past hour, roughly, you see that Dauphin Island, Bayou La Batre, and the eastern side, I'm sorry, the western side, this is terrible, will be under heavy precipitation for a long time. And I'm about to go take a 10-minute break, guys. I will leave the radar up on a zoomed out scale and be back at the top of the hour.
Oh, power nap needed, I think. You
Well
guys
done.
didn't help, David in particular. He just
I apologise. My sense
dreadful.
of humour, but anyway.
Dreadful.
Back to Nelson's previous question of if they'll upgrade this to a hurricane. If I were in the national David, your laughing's gonna get me. He's muted himself.
Stop it.
He's probably bursting out laughing. But in really just the context of the question, I would go with 70 at the moment. There's enough evidence to indicate that there are sustained winds of 70 miles an hour, at least in my opinion, according to Doppler radar. I don't think there's quite enough just yet to say 75. People in the chat are losing their minds. They are saying that this was quite fun. So.
Well, I guess we have a little light and shade.
I guess you could say that.
Yeah, going back to that thing. I was looking at the other radar. There's another radar, secondary radar that they have there in New Orleans. Albeit it does not have as wide of a range as the main radar does. But I was looking at it too, and it did show also 70 mile an hour plus winds with it. Albeit there is some radar interference in that, so they could be slightly exaggerated or under exaggerated, I guess, if you were. I can't find the correct word for that, but it's certainly, I would say, next update it's possible that they raise it to 70 miles per hour. 75 miles per hour, I don't know, but then again, it is the National Hurricane Center, so they may do that if they deem it fit enough.
And as we go on through the night on this live stream, the content that we're producing since 1 a.m. when I took the stream is going to be re-uploaded after the fact as well. You can already catch the first hour since 1 a.m. if you missed it, which has just been uploaded to our channel now, and we'll keep going through that throughout the night. David?
Just a bit of old news. Due to Tropical Storm Barry, we're anticipating longer than usual wait times over the weekend. Please check with your airline for updates.
For airlines, okay.
Atlanta Airport.
Atlanta. Well, anyone in that area is now more informed about those flights. Hank is on a flight tonight.
Yes.
A lot of lightning from Barry.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Somebody was just going off of somebody in the chat really quick. They said that they don't understand how the storm looks so disorganized on Doppler radar specifically, and it's almost a hurricane. Well, this storm's been fairly south. Well, not south, but its convection has been. Let me rephrase it. The convection's been more southerly driven. Sorry, I can't find the correct word for that. It's late over here. So the convection's been more to the south. I mean, we've had hurricanes in the past that have not fully have had an asymmetric CDO before. We've had I think a big example of that would be Earl of 1998. That was pretty much half a hurricane. And it was I think yeah, it was pretty much half a hurricane, and I think it was like a Category 2 officially, I think. And that was solely due to recon alone. If there was no recon, it probably would have been maybe high-end tropical storm or maybe
Gene
low-end
of
Cat 1 at
1980 is
most.
worse.
Oh, yeah, that one too. So there have been instances where this has happened. So we could get a hurricane that looks not really good on satellite or radar, but with recon or ground observations can be certainly a hurricane.
But look at this latest imagery, and you'll see it's pretty impressive if you ask me.
Wow.
Oh yeah, that big flare up.
It's interesting. If that flare up remains, I would give it hurricane status. If it begins to weaken back off, I'd give it 7.
Damn. This is a tough call for the National Hurricane Center in just over an hour's time. They might update early, we'll see. We will cover that update as soon as it comes out here on Force 13 Live as we continue our coverage throughout the night. We'll be here for you, no matter what, I suppose. As of right now, if we're going to draw a line from where we think the center is to New Orleans, that is about 111 miles. If we draw it from the nearest point of land, it's about 34 miles. Morgan City is about 73 miles. Not moving very quickly. This loop here covers a half-hour period, and if you look at its movement, it's gone nowhere. Stay tuned for more. This is Force 13 Live. We'll be back with more coverage in a few minutes. Coverage continues in a moment. You can follow Force 13's outlets, the website force13.com, our YouTube page, youtube.com/Force13, on Facebook under the same name, Force13, and our Twitter handle, it's @Force13 if you wish to get in touch. You can also add Force13 on Skype and my personal account on Discord, Fool13, at extension 9094. You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. Force 13 Live brings you the latest on Tropical Storm Barry, which is edging closer to the coast of Louisiana. It's 3 o'clock in the morning in Central Time. It's 9 a.m. here at Force 13 HQ. My name is Nathan Foy. I'm here with you once again. It's the third hour that I'm taking you for. Of course, it is the 12th hour now of our live coverage on Barry. At this time. Alright, well, let's move over there and see what the latest is with our team, our dwindling team, because it's so late in the night over there. But we are joined by David, Thomas, and Nelson.
Good to be here again. And as we have said, Barry's inching towards the Louisiana coast, expect to be a hurricane. However, I note that it's going to be later today, going by the 1 a.m.
Much later today.
So,
yeah, if anyone was expecting a landfall overnight, which I was, it's not going to happen. We're expecting a landfall now, 9 a.m. Central Time at the earliest. So that is still 6 hours away, and that is also a little bit hopeful. It could be possibly even stretching into the early afternoon. Central Time, so that is pretty crazy. The National Hurricane Center will update towards the end of this hour with their next full advisory, so make sure you stay up for that if you're staying right now. Nelson.
Yes, hello.
You
Hello.
sound much better than you did 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, I inhaled a